Hey guys, Chad Trofgerman here. Welcome back to the Steve in the Alien Anime Studio tutorial series. This lesson will be focusing on all of the scenery shots that we will be designing for the cartoon. These shots will then be integrated with all the assets we have created in the previous lessons, and then we can animate everything out and create our cartoon. So to get started, we'll first need a new document. We are going to create the first shot of the series where we have an angle shot of the highway. And this is actually why we made the front angle shot of the van in the previous lesson. So we can have our new document open, and with our layers panel here, we'll just double click to rename the first layer ground and click OK. Now we want to set our lines and colors, so we'll make sure that the line width is set to 4. The stroke we can make a dark green because we are going to be drawing some grass here. And the fill color can be also a greenish color. Okay, so now we'll take the add point tool, and starting on the left side here, and we'll go near the top, probably just a little ways past the center. Start right here, and we can start drawing out the ground. And it's going to be a little bit wavy, kind of like this. Okay, and now we want to close it off. So what we can do there is just put a point down like this and go over like this and then up like this. And that will now create the ground for us. And you know, you have some of this stuff in the on the sidelines, but that won't be shown, so that's not something you have to worry about. All right, next, let's create the road that we have going from this point down to this point. So we'll make a new layer and name it road. And before we get started with this, what you may want to do is import your van into the scenery. That way you can match the van angle with the road angle. So we can go to File, Import, Anime Studio Object, and then we can locate the van, which I have right here, and I can bring in then the van angle and click OK. So now we can use this as a reference. So we'll want the van to go from here and go like this. So we can place it right here and maybe even shrink it a little bit. And that will give us a good reference for when drawing the road. So now on the road layer, we'll take the add point tool and we can set the stroke to black and the fill color to something of a dark gray variety. And to start off, I will use sharp corners. And starting right about here, we can draw down like this and try to get it to match the van as best as possible. Like that. And I can even bring this down if I need to, like this. All right. Now we'll create the second point of the road, which will be right about here. So then we can draw like this. And we want to expand the road outward because we are going towards the screen with this. So about like that. And then we can close this portion off. And then coming in here, I can deselect my sharp corners option and just nudge this point up. All we want to do here is just match the line that's going across like this. And there we go. We now have the road placed on the ground. Next, let's add some road lines to the road. So make a new vector layer, and we can name this road lines. And grab the add point tool, and we can turn sharp corners on. For the stroke, we will do a dark yellow. And for the fill, we will do a more brighter yellow. Now starting about right here, we can draw out a line. We might need to adjust the size of these as we move forward here, but it'll kind of give us a start here. And then we'll do one right about here, and I can hide the van momentarily. And I might actually now shrink these just a little bit, because I think they're a little bit too big. About like that. And then we can move up like this and get this one shrunk. And then I will add one more. That'll probably be a little bit cut off, but that's okay. That looks pretty good. We can always, again, adjust this stuff later, but we kind of wanted to go from a smaller to bigger perspective. And if I bring the van back in, it looks like we are on the right side of the road. So that looks pretty good. And the van might, but you have to keep in mind too, the van's going to increase in size as we go down the road here. And so I know this line looks really big compared to the van right now, but we will be increasing the size as it goes. So hopefully that will compensate for that. And if not, we can always, again, adjust the lines and make them a little bit smaller, but we'll see how it goes. Next, let's add some details to the sides of a road, because we don't want to just go from grass to road. We kind of want some transition there. So I will make a new layer, and I'll call it Road side 1, and I'll place it below the road. Now taking the add point tool, and we can leave the sharp corners on. I can start right about here where the road starts and move in about like that. And then we can close it off then. And you can put it on the road itself because we have the object underneath the road. Now, I didn't pick a color because I am going to add a gradient to this. So, with the object selected, how it is right now, I will select the Effect dialog box and choose Gradient. Now we want a linear gradient, and what we want is to choose the color of the grass and then transition into a brown color, which will eventually then lead to the road. So to do this, what we may have to do actually, before I get too far ahead of myself here, is grab the color from the outside, on the outside of the grass by using the eyedropper tool. So click that, and then select your fill color, and then copy this number you see in your color picker dialog box. And to copy it, just holding Control and hit C, or if you're on a Mac, Command and C. Then, taking the Select Shape tool, we'll select that shape again, and then go back into our gradient by selecting the 3 dots next to the gradient. Double-clicking then on your white color, we can paste that number in here by using Control-V or Command-V if you're on a Mac. And then for the dark part, we will choose a brown color. And then click OK. From here, we can take our Select Shape tool and adjust the gradient accordingly. Can try that and see how it looks. It looks pretty good. What I'll do now is remove the line, though, that we have, this yellow line. So I'll click on the shape with my Select Shape tool and then go up to the Style box and deselect Stroke. So now we have a seamless color that goes from green to brown. And if we render this out, we can see that even more coming into play. Now let's do the same for the other side of the road. So we'll make a new layer, a vector layer, and name it Road Side 2. And then we can grab the eyedropper tool and just select this gradient we just made. So we have that gradient in the style properties. And then we can take the add point tool. And since we're seeing less of this side of the road, we can start this gradient more around here and bring it up just like this. Down and up like that. And of course, make sure that we remove the stroke color from this by just using our Shape Select tool and deselecting Stroke from the styles. And then, you still using the Shape Select tool, we can come in here and adjust the gradient so that we get the brown to green going here. Actually, I gotta flip this around. There we go. It's very faint, but we can still see it. And if it's still too faint for you, you can always try to get it adjusted like this. There, that's a little bit better. Okay. So next, we want to create the hills for this scene. So, adding a new vector layer, we'll name this Mountain Range 1. And grabbing the Add Point tool, we'll make sure our Sharp Corners is turned on. And then we'll grab a fill color and we'll try something brownish like that. And now a stroke color also, we need to choose that of a dark brown variety. And so now starting back here, we're just going to come up and down and just create some mountains for us. To have in the background. And this can keep going as long as you need to. We'll probably be extending this mountain range when we start animating out the scenes. So you can add, oops, don't want to do that. You can add as much as you want to it. Oops, and I gotta make sure my gradient is turned off. I sometimes forget to do that when making a new object. Okay, there we go. Oh, and I also want to make sure that my mountain range is below everything else on the layer panel. So you can just grab it on the layer panel and move it down if you haven't already done so. Now the next step is to move these mountains into the background further. And to do this, we can take the Translate Layer tool. And up here, you'll notice that we have X, Y, and Z. Let's change the Z to -6. When we hit enter, you'll notice that the mountain range shrinks, but what happened is we just put it further into the background from the camera. And this will come into play when we actually do camera pans and such when we animate. So once you've done that, just take your layer scale tool and increase it. And then move it back to where it was. Now next, we need to make another new layer and name it Mountain Range 2. And we'll put this one below the first mountain range. Now getting your Add Point tool and your select and your fill color should be something darker than your first set of brown hills. We'll start around here and go up and down like this. And we're just going to create a second mountain range just to give it some depth. Like that. And we will take our Translate Layer tool and move this back to -7 because we will have these even further in the background than that of the first set of mountains. And of course, make sure you grab your Scale Layer tool and you just increase the size of that and nudge it over like that. Now, what we need to do next is add a blur effect to these mountains, just to kind of offset it a bit from the foreground. So double-clicking on your first mountain range, we will choose a blur radius of, let's start with 5, and click OK. And now if we preview this, you can see that they're a little bit more blurry. Double click to go back in, and we might need to change this to 7 or something like that. Now for the second mountain range, we want the blur radius to be even more. So I'll change that to 12. And now we can see that there is a blur occurring on this mountain range. Now for the final parts, we need to put the sky in as well as some clouds. So let's first do the sky. We'll make a new layer and name this sky and move it down like this. Then grab your shape tool and make sure that it is a rectangle, and you can turn auto stroke off if you wish. And we want to make a gradient for this. We want to go from a darker orange to a lighter orange. So I'll choose gradient. And we'll make this part the lighter orange. And then we'll have a darker orange. And now we'll draw out the rectangle to encompass the entire project file. And then if we select the Select Shape tool, we can adjust the gradient if need be. Like that. Now, the other thing I want to do with the sky is make it so that it's immune to camera movements, because we'll be moving the camera when we start animating these scenes out, and there's really no need for the sky to move along with the camera. So to do that, you can double click on your sky and choose Immune to Camera Movements and click OK. And now finally, we'll add some clouds. So make a new vector layer and choose Clouds as the name. And we'll grab the Add Point tool and make sure Sharp Corners is deselected. And we don't have a gradient for this. For the stroke, we will use a dark yellow. And for the fill, we'll use a bright yellow. So we'll add about 3 clouds. So starting up here, I'll just draw out a cloud. And I can add one even underneath the mountains. And then we'll add one more right up here. And what I can do too is make these a little bit transparent, just to give it a little bit more of a cloud-like look, as well as blur them like I did the mountains. So I'll double click to go in here, and I can change the opacity to about, let's say, 75. Let's see what that does. And I'll do the blur radius at about 20 and see what that does for us. And now when I render this out, I can see that it worked out pretty well, although I may want to adjust the blur radius. I think it's a little bit too blurry. So I'll go back in there, and let's turn this back to about 13, and I'll put the opacity to 50. And that looks better. And we can always adjust more of that if you feel like your clouds are not transparent enough or what have you. Now finally, I noticed something while I was working on my project file here. And I know I said this right away in the beginning of the series to make sure that all of your project files are set to a certain size. And I realized that this certain project file was not. So I need to resize this project file really quick because right now it is really small. If I go to File, Project Settings, I can adjust my sizes right here, and I'm just going to turn this up to 720p. And again, you can go to a higher resolution if you wish, and I kind of described that in my first lesson. And then we will click OK. So now that should hopefully be better. And if I render this out, and I noticed too that I made my line thickness a little bit thick for the road and the mountains and such. So if need be, I can go back in here and select these objects and then just reduce the line width to 4 like I originally had it. But when you resize your stage and your properties and all that, it can sometimes throw those things out of whack. So that's why it's always best to have that stuff taken care of before you dive in. Otherwise, you'll have some more work to do when you have to reset everything. So just something to keep in mind. That looks a little bit better. Okay. Anyway, to wrap this up, that is the first shot of our highway. What we'll be doing from here is building other highway shots. We can use some of the assets that we made in this shot and carry them over to the other shots. So that will really help us out when we are working on future shots. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.